So one of the questions, there were several people, actually 6 or 7 people, who all had pretty much the same question. And one of the, well, there were two big lines of questions that people had. The one was what to do if you're not actually with the person you are with. They're either in another town, you have a long distance relationship, or you are isolated separately. So you're suddenly finding yourself in a situation where you can't see the person you are dating, or even one woman emailed in, her and her husband are separated during a quarantine. So that was one thing that a lot of people had questions about. And then the other one was what to do if we're suddenly stuck in an apartment. We usually don't live together, or we only live partially together, and now we're stuck, and I'm worried that it's going to kill the excitement and the polarity. So those were the kind of two things that several people had questions on. So I'll start out with them, but if you have questions, because this is a Q&A, then raise your hand and I will find you and unmute you. So as far as long distance relationships go, the rules that govern long distance relationships are usually such that people have their own lives and they have their own set of circumstances. And then at some point, everybody comes together and gets to spend some time, with each other. And of course, if you can't do that, it becomes a very, very prolonged not seeing each other. And so people were asking, what do I do? How can I keep it interesting? And there's unfortunately no pat answer, because it depends on where your relationship is. I would certainly say that in a time like what we're dealing with right now, which is totally unprecedented as as a situation, the priority should be towards connection, communication, and polarity and attraction and sex is a secondary consideration. This is true for both people living together and people not living together, because in a moment where there is so much unknown and so much stress and so much disturbance outside and inside and in the nervous system, it's much more important that there is communication and harmony and connection over, wild sexual exploration via Zoom or something like that. That's good if it happens, but I wouldn't put the focus there. And I certainly wouldn't put pressure on that particular element. And I'll explain that in a second. So ways to increase communication, of course, is if you're in a long distance relationship suddenly, meaning you're not together, is to in some way connect either via audio or video, and spend some time speaking about things that are not the day-to-day stuff. So if you find yourself in a position where you can't connect with your partner physically, then the best thing to do is come up with some kind of a protocol as to how you're speaking about things. And what I mean by that is it can't just be you call each other, you tell each other the horror stories of what you read on the news and the horrible things that have happened in not working or working from home or still having to go to work. That's good and that's useful, but it shouldn't be the basis of every conversation. So one way you could do it, if you can speak multiple times within a certain time period, is have meetings about specific things. So you could have a meeting that says, okay, let's just talk about logistics or our jobs or things that we need to discuss that are important. And then put that aside and allow for that to sit completely separately, and then make another time or within the same call open a conversation that is much more, how are you? What's going on? How are you feeling? Is there something I can help you with or support you with? Is there something that we can do together right this moment that would help you with how you're feeling? So that should be the first line of personal connection. Other strategies or things that you can do is you can come up with specific things you want to talk about. And I would really strongly recommend, I'm laughing because I get emails and calls and session requests every single day of people who've suddenly opened a can of worms in their relationship, and suddenly they're having these heavy duty relationship conversations in a time where it can't actually be properly resolved. So unless it's some kind of massive crisis, keep those heavy things for another time and focus on things that you do appreciate about each other. So one way to go is something like a gratitude list in general, and also specifically about the person you're with. Praise, super important. And then friends of mine who are not in the same city right now are having started reading poetry to each other. So they spend an hour in the evening reading poetry to each other and talking about things that have nothing to do with anything that's going on. So there's many ways that you can do that, and reading things together or looking at things together is one good way to connect that's not very conflict inducing. So those are some of the more connecting through the heart tips. If you are finding yourself in a situation where you feel like you want to connect physically, but you can't, and you want to kind of keep the erotic aspect alive and in play. One thing that you can, of course, do if you have to do long distance, and this is always true, is you can kind of write, I don't know, erotic short stories to each other, or fantasies of some sort that you email each other or send each other or speak to each other. That's up. Up to you to decide. But there is, of course, ways that you can erotically engage, and I'm sure Steve will add some as well. But as I said, I don't think it's the primary focus during a moment of crisis. You want to add to that?
Well, actually, your point there about trying to proactively talk about something that isn't the elephant in the room is really useful, I think. One will find, I think, that the tendency is to discuss the latest news, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that would be the default, to discuss the latest news, to speculate about, or to discuss one's own routine and relationship to it. You had to go to the pharmacy today or something, and there was nobody there, or there was lots of people there, or stuff like that. Or to speculate about the future, or what could mean, or what's going to happen, and sort of recycle those talking points that are out there. And it's not necessarily a bad idea to do that, but I think one may find that an effort has to be made to say something or discuss something or bring up a topic that's deliberately not that, at least sometimes. Otherwise, you'll find yourself, I think, hour after hour talking about going around that cycle, going over your plans, going over all this sort of thing. So it can really be anything, And I said before that sometimes Michaela's talking about reading poetry. I think somebody reading poetry to me over Zoom is almost worse than COVID-19. But that's my own personal taste, but things like sharing songs, like say, okay, let's have a Skype date, friend or lover or whatever, or potential lover, let's have a Skype date, and each of us brings 3 YouTube clips with some songs that we like, and we play the songs, or something like that, or each of us comes with some funny clip, comedy or something like that, or talking about anything other than, Harry Potter. Which house would you be if you had to be in a house? Which house would you be? Would you be the Gryffindor or the Hufflepuff or the other ones? I'm running out of Harry Potter knowledge. Who would win in a fight between Gandalf and Dumbledore? Stuff like that. I think that's actually quite good as an exercise in deliberately talking about something else, because the fact, as pressing as the main issue of the day is, there are other things happening. There is other stuff. One of the things that you do in meditation a strategy for working with pain, for instance, chronic pain, for example, is that, let's say you've got chronic pain in some part of your body. Of course, your attention is naturally drawn to that place because it hurts. And so you're drawn to it and think, my knee is really sore, or my back is really sore. And that's understandable. But one of the tactics that can be used, or strategies that can be used, is you can sit there with your in your meditation, or if you're working with a client, and you can ask them to find a place in the body where there's relatively neutral sensation, or where there's absence of sensation or relatively neutral sensation. And you may discover, in the case of pain, that yes, you have a lot of pain in maybe several areas of the body, but there may well be some place where there isn't pain. Maybe your nose is fine. Your nose is fine. Or maybe your tongue is actually totally cool. The tongue, totally cool, even though every other joint in your body might hurt. You might be, every surface is elevated in terms of its temperature, or in your feelings, oxygen deprivation or something of the case. But then you look around and you notice the space in the room is fine. You're suffering, but the space is fine. The colors are there, unburdened by the suffering or the difficulty that you may be experiencing personally or physically. And that's not a be all and end all, and it's not to say that that's the cure, but on the other hand, it is a strategy that's used with pain. And so certainly I think conversationally, we can do that. We can say, yes, there's all this, and let's talk about it. But now let's try to talk about Harry Potter or something else, as an exercise in recognizing that there is more going on. So that's some things about that.
Yeah. So we have some hand raises, so I'll take those, but I will get back to how do you deal with somebody in the same household, and how do you not completely lose all attraction to that person. I'm going to go to Tracy.
Hi.
Hi. How's it going with the rambunctious kids in the house?
I just threw a video on so I could ask this question with relative silence. So everyone's still alive. I had asked Steve a question on Facebook the other day about kind of adrenaline and how necessary it is. And I was saying to him that Eddie and we lived on a sailboat for a year, and there was this kind of life force living on a boat that I don't feel on land, which was just that the stakes are higher. So if you don't drop your anchor correctly, you might find yourself up against a rocky shore with your, home and life at risk. If you forget to tie your dinghy up, it might float out to sea and you have no way to get to land. And there's something similar to me about what's going on right now. If you need to go out to get groceries or whatnot, any wrong move could have greater consequences than it normally does. And also, I have 2 young kids, and I'm suddenly having to be, 5 people, and just to stay on top of our harmony and the cleanliness and their need for learning and activity is like a huge thrust. And I feel adrenaline running through my system. So it doesn't feel sustainable, this way that I'm having to cope. And I'm wondering, how much of it is needed to rise to the occasion, or if there's ways to, and I'm meditating and doing movement practice, but it just can't touch the 11 hours that I feel like I'm really driving hard. So I don't know if does that make sense as a question?
Yep, it does make sense. And it does make good sense. And it's for good reason that you're feeling those responses, I think. And you're doing a lot of the right things, as you mentioned. you're doing what you can to de-escalate your nervous system and come out of that heightened response where, you know, and de-stress and so on. And that is actually vital. This is one of those situations, I think, where self-care, as the Californians put it, is actually an operationally necessary thing to actually treat your body in a way and your mind, like, and your nervous system, like it needs to perform under duress for a long period of time, which it may need to do. So that's good. And some things that seem to be helping is having systems and routines in place. So when you're going to get mail, having a protocol that you think, having done some research, that you think is the best sort of way to receive your mail. If you've got to go to the pharmacy, what's the plan? And everyone will have their ideas about that, and their, you know, epidemiologists and so on are advising a lot of things about that, which we can be advised by those sorts of experts. But what about when you got to go to the grocery store, et cetera, et cetera? What if somebody gets sick in the family? Do we have a protocol for that? And having, as much as possible, systems and protocols in place. And then no protocol or system is 100% foolproof. There's human error, and there's unknown elements that will come into play. So understanding that having done the best you can is all you can do. But the good thing about protocols is when you've agreed upon those things, you can actually stop thinking as much about them until you do them, until you have to load that protocol. Okay, we're getting the mail. It's our weekly mail run or something like that. Now we go to high alert and we know exactly what we're going to do. And we're not going to be jumping at shadows because we have a protocol and we've got a system, and we'll move slowly and we'll do what we got to do. You know, and then that's that. So you have these protocols to load when you have them. But understand, you can't think of everything. You can't protect yourself from every eventuality. You could be going down to the mail and, you know, slip on a banana skin, knock yourself unconscious, and then maybe live an entire lifetime in some sort of alternate alien planet, like in that Star Trek episode with Jean-Luc Picard called Hidden Light. There's this sort of phenomenon in space. He encounters it. He ends up living an entire whole different life on this planet. Inner Light, I think it's called. Terrific episode, by the way. It's my favorite Next Generation episode. The point being, shit happens. Even the best laid plans of mice and men oft go awry, don't they? So I think good plan, good protocols. Don't be afraid to go into high alert when it's time to implement those things, but at the same time, try to stay calm, have your faculties available to you. Your meditation is going to be very valuable here. Your movement practice is very valuable. Laughing, joking, singing, all these things that are seen in some points of view as luxuries could be seen also as survival things. Morale, psychology, especially in groups, well, actually even by yourself, is a vital part of survival. It's a vital part. There are whole books written on the psychology of survival. I often say that if you find yourself in a survival situation, you've fallen out of your hot air balloon in the jungle or something, and you're in a tough spot, people will have a range of responses, from denial, of course, to panic and freak out. There'll be a whole range. Of course, the best response is to accept the situation, not passively, but to accept that you are indeed in the situation. There's no point in denying it. There's no point in fighting that you're stuck in the jungle. You can fight to get out of the jungle or fight to get rescued, but you know, you can do what you can do, but there's no point denying that you're stuck in the jungle. And energy spent in denial can be better spent assessing. What is the situation? What's the best we can do? And you keep doing the best you can do until you're out of choices. That's it. And you may make some mistakes. You keep trying and trying and trying until there's no more try left. And then when there's no more try left, you're either out or you're, let's say, at the end of the road. And there's an end of the road for all of us. And all we can do, I think, is our best until that point comes, and try and make the most of it. You know, it could be, anything can happen to any of us at any time. Heart attacks, like I said, banana skins, you know, flying squirrels, you know, choking the air passages. Anything can happen. And may as well, given that we don't know when we're going to die, even never mind this virus, although including it, why not make the most of it? Why not make the most of the time that we have left, however long or short that might be, by being smart, enjoying, celebrating, smelling the roses, and that sort of thing. So this is some miscellaneous thoughts on it. You know, use your adrenaline, but don't let the adrenaline take control of you in a sort of chronic way. That's not that's not, as you correctly say, a sustainable way of proceeding. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the one thing I want to add to that, and Steve said it already, you know, in a slightly different way, adrenaline in the system is not a bad thing, because that is how we function. And so within the system, there is an allowance for adrenaline and for that particular cycle. It's just important that you step it down on occasion so the system can reboot and replenish. And it's certainly not out of the question to take some extra adrenal support in addition to, you know, the good routines and the good practices. And of course, getting enough sleep is crucial, you know, really, really crucial. So, all right. Thank you, Tracy. Okay. Any other live questions here? So bottom of the panel, Gabriella. Hello.
How are you?
Hi.
My question is about, well, for those of us who facilitate or teach live groups, right? So I'm a yoga teacher and lead workshops and transitioning to an online space. So for me, it's always, you know, I've always thrived on the palpable energy of a group of people, live people in front of me. How do you translate that onto an online space? Especially, I have issues with, I can't really, I need to put on my glasses on and off, and I have to see. I have tested it out a few classes, and it's just not the same. So what is the art of gathering online? I'm sure, you know, you're masters at it, you and Steve, but yeah, just any advice that you can give on that.
Steve, do you want to start or shall I?
Sure. Yeah, I just make a quick point to begin. One of the things to recognize is that you're right. The dynamic is not the same. So what is the thing that's lacking? Well, in a sense, many things, but it's that face-to-face, real-time kind of thing. And one thing as a teacher of anything, whether it's a school class or yoga class or whatever it is, you are informed by the feedback you're getting from the room. There's a certain sense in which the room orients you or can help, or is one of the factors that goes into the way you pitch your voice tone, and if you repeat the point, if you elaborate with a story, or if you think they've got it already, and things like that. So you're constantly, in a certain sense, being informed by the room. And that's something that can not be as easy to get a feel for on a different platform like Zoom or Skype or whatever's the case. And that can make one feel a little bit like you don't know how to orient, you don't know how to navigate, and so on. So recognizing at the very least that the thing that's missing is that feedback, and that's only a part of what makes you able to teach, and it's only part of what goes into your skill set, and that you can compensate for that. And indeed you must compensate for that. And it may be a little bit weird, but you'll get used to it. It's the same if you have any kind of injury in the body, you know, well, you've hurt your knee and you can't walk in the same way, but you can still get somewhere. Maybe you've got to hop, you know, for a little while, and then eventually it gets used to it. We have in Ojai, this 3-legged dog called Jamie. He's got 3 legs. You probably, if you follow my Instagram or Michaela's Instagram, you probably have seen lots of Jamie. I would say he's my spirit animal, but I think I'm his spirit human. Actually, it's the other way around. But anyway, he's got 3 legs because he was a rescue dog and he was mistreated and he lost one of his legs. Is he down there?
Yes, I'll bring him up.
Bring him up, yeah. Oh, yes.
Here is Jamie, the 3-legged dog.
Yeah, so he's got 3 legs, right? Which is not the usual way for a dog, the usual amount of legs for a dog, but he gets around. You know, he gets around. If you're the mailman or the mail lady or the mail person, and he's decided that you're an intruder, he can make some pretty fast headway. He can zoom right across the room. He figured it out. And so anyway, one of the things that I think is really good to try to do when you're coming on to a call like that is to try to orient yourself in advance. And there's a number of ways you can do it. If you happen to have the attendee list in advance, you can, something I've done before is you can take that attendee list and read the names out loud, perhaps to yourself. What are you doing there? You're doing something that would naturally happen when you walk in a class, which is you look at everyone's faces and, you get that feedback. You can kind of do something like that. You read the list. If you're the sort of person who believes in, good intentions or prayer or something, you can just say maybe a little thing for each person. That's something I learned in my teens from the Christian mystic that I worked with for a number of years. To sit there and take the name and say, may Gabriela Espinosa flourish in her online teaching, or may Gabriela Espinosa find a way of connecting, or something like this. It doesn't have to be a material thing, or it could be, may Gabriela Espinosa feel at ease, or may she feel, so on and so forth. And in Buddhism, they have these loving kindness meditations, which you could also do if you're more into that. You could go through the list and do some Brahma Vihara practice, for instance. You can look that up, Brahma Vihara practice. Loving kindness phrases and so on, good vibes or whatever. Or you can look at that list of people and say, okay, these are people. They're a list of names that represent a set of people with lives. They're going to be grids on a Zoom call, but they're people. And you try to sort of remember that and humanize the audience in advance. Something I like to say sometimes is, may this be useful, may I be of service. And sometimes I say, may I be of service even in unexpected ways, or ways that I didn't intend to be. And very often you find that when you're teaching, someone comes to you and says, that thing you said, it totally opened my eyes. And you think, what was it I said? And they tell you, and you think, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant at all. But whatever, they got their thing out of it. So that's often the case. So I think a bit of pre-game stuff. The alternative, of course, is you're running around, you're getting your tea, you're inviting people on the Zoom, you're putting the cat to sleep, and you're doing all these things, and then you hit live and you're on there. It's like, okay, now you've got to go time. And you have to be a real pro to be able to do it that way.
So the other thing is, I never get to do anything because we're always traveling and teaching. So I'm using this time to take online classes of things that I never get to go to. There's a place in Ojai that's a dance studio, and they teach every kind of, dance. And I always very longingly look at their schedule and never have time. So now that they're doing online stuff and I'm home, I can actually do that. And it's somewhat bizarre to do a group dance class via Zoom. But the woman who is the main teacher there's other people, but the woman who's the main teacher, who is trained in classical Indian dance and all other kinds of stuff, and is really, really good. She has such strong practice that, practice, I mean her practice of dance and her bodily enjoyment in the dance, that she can totally transmit that via Zoom, no problem. You can see it, you can in your body feel her body. And interestingly enough, because you're not distracted by anyone else, it's just her. I make the view so that I just see her. It's really actually quite potent, because it's like almost like a one-on-one interaction with somebody who has really strong bodily transmission. And I find it really fun, and really interesting to play around with that for myself and in feeling other people. Then I did something yesterday with somebody else who also is a 5 rhythms teacher. And that was really, really not good, because that person was, just not using their body. They were so freaked out by the video and looking good. And you could tell that that person was constantly looking if they were like at a good angle on their Zoom camera. And it was hideous. I lasted like 8 minutes or something like that. And the music wasn't set up, and it was all way too technical. And there was all this spouting of spiritual truths while trying to teach. And it was like, so those would be some things I would say is, deliver the best of your practice, right? And deliver to your strength and not try reinventing the wheel or try doing things that you wouldn't usually do, so that the people who see you doing the thing that you're good at. And I think that's a good start. And the rest is just creativity. So yeah,
probably keeping it simple. I think maybe not trying to go beyond. I think keeping it simple
is an excellent choice. Yeah, really, really excellent choice. Yeah. So good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hello.
Hello. Such a pleasure to be here. Really, I've been following you, and I'm joining. Who knows? Maybe one of your courses in August, the Wild Woman's Teacher Training Circle, and I'm so honored, really. I've been doing a lot of embodiment work, practice, the how do you call it's all kinds of movements, and my question is, as I do embodiment work, how can I tune into to other people to actually get to know how to help them, but through tuning into them, because I'm very much focused on myself, in what I can do for myself to be more embodied, to be more in tune with, connect with myself and my sensations and all of this. But then when I have to tune into someone else, I like what you said before, that you said I could feel her body and my body when you were taking that class. So my question is, how can I listen to really what the person I have in front of me needs through sensing her? Or is it through, the more I am in myself and connect to myself, the more I can naturally sense what that person actually needs and not what I think she needs, and how can I listen more? It's something I'm starting to, I think there's something there to work on myself. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So you essentially said it, right? Which is that how we feel other people is via our own instrument of feeling, and that's our body. Right. And it's the body. It's of course also visuals and the mind, but it's mostly and predominantly the best kind of feeling you can do via the body. And there's of course also, lots of research done on things like mirror neurons, where your body picks up somebody else's state and replicates it in your body. So there's a lot of, if you really want to kind of go down that road from a more intellectual and cognitive level, there's a lot of reading you can do on things like mirror neurons. But most importantly is that we feel other people through our feeling body. And so the more embodied and the more in touch with the signals of your own body you are, the better you can feel someone else. And as a matter of fact, in all the teaching we're doing when we teach people to connect with other people, we're always first sensitizing to our own bodies. And there's all kinds of exercises we do. So you get sensitive to the sensations and the emotions and also the thoughts, but mostly the sensations and emotions. And then from there, you start feeling someone else. Being sensitized to one's sensations and emotions is not the same as being overly sensitive. Right? Some people, they start sensitizing and then they get so overwhelmed that they can barely leave the house anymore because, that it's just too much. What I'm talking about is good sensitivity to all sensations and emotions without getting overwhelmed by it. And for that, of course, you have to have good embodiment, the ability to de-escalate your nervous system, to release things, to deal with things adequately, to have some, let's say, capacity to process things. And so when that's all done, then you can sensitize to the messages of your body. And then you become sensitive to what's happening in your own body. Once that's done, there is the extra step of then kind of expanding your awareness beyond yourself to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a little bit like concentric circles, right? There's you and feeling yourself fully, and then you kind of relax and widen your perception outwards, and then you'll feel somebody else. And then, of course, over time, as you get good at that, you can feel a lot of people, right, all at once, or you can feel people far away, or you can connect with nature in a very specific way by relaxing your awareness and spreading out, and then feeling what happens in your own body as a means to detect what's happening. And the last thing I want to say about that is essentially that there is trial and error in that, right? Because sometimes we have projections. Sometimes we can't tell what's ours and what somebody else's. And so how you practice good perception of somebody else is that you kind of, in hindsight, double check what was yours, what was somebody else's, when you can figure that one out, right? Where you feel something and then you'll ask somebody about it, and then they go, oh yeah, how did you know? And you know, and then you go, oh, okay, this felt this way and that was correct. And then you say something else, and then they say, no, that wasn't it, but this happened. And so then you kind of calibrate in hindsight, and you learn how your body picks up certain things. And then you get very good at this fairly quickly if you train that way.
Yes. Yes. Mm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's the overwhelm. It's the over. When you said about the overwhelm, I was asking this question, Michaela. My heart was throbbing, and I was like, oh, sometimes my words wouldn't come out. And then I kind of relaxed into the question, and I took hold of myself. And like, for me, this is big, talking with other people on a platform that I don't know about. And really, it's something big. And I'm so happy for myself. Yeah. So yeah, I felt that overwhelm. And when it's the overwhelm, I have to contain myself to just come back and then just cool and relax, and then take things bit by bit. But yeah, I really thank you for your response. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. I'm going to mute you. Tracy, I see you have your hand raised, but one thing that I do want to just answer, because there were 6 or 7 different questions along the same line. I'm just pulling this up here. So there were questions like, currently my boyfriend and I are staying with each other so I can work from his place due to internet issues. My concern is that the desire, want, friction, conversation will tire as we are with each other all the time. So there's a few of those questions, and I wanted to answer that. And then also there was another really, really good question I want to kind of attend to quickly. But so this is a quick answer for anybody who is worried about their attraction. The same rules apply in this moment than always apply, which is, even if you're stuck in the same space, you must take a little bit of time apart. And if it's a small apartment or there's space restrictions, it's really important that you allow each person some time by themselves. So if your partner happens to want to sit in a corner and watch YouTube, do not pester them. You know, if they want to be in the bathroom by themselves for like an hour, don't pester them. It's really, really important that you, even within a very small space or in a restriction, give each other space, as much space as you can. And then the other thing that's really, really important is, and I said this earlier, the same is true in the long distance thing, is that you don't muddle all conversations together. Have themed conversations. Talk about the bills and the logistics of how to acquire food or whatever in one conversation. Do things together that have nothing to do with the daily requirements. And as Steve said, that could be making music, listening to music, watching funny things, watching movies, going for walks as appropriate, working out together, anything you can do that's different, and anything you can do to not roll it all in one. So that's my quick and dirty advice here. Steve, you're smiling, so I'm pretty sure you have something to add. Would love to hear you guide us through the importance of creating sacred space, your living house, and the art of setting a mood or flavor of a space, and how your use of elements inspires this. So Camille, you're unmuted.
Michaela, I just
Hi.
was thinking so much about that now that we're all stuck at home. So if you could give us anything about not just, I mean like creating sacred space, but also little peppering the day with little pleasure rituals, perhaps, anything you can give to us. I know you're into preparing tea, those kinds of suggestions that we could really focus on for this period.
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, I might have to do an entire call on that. As a matter of fact, we've just rolled out the pleasure course, the Awakening the Pleasure Body, and that's all about that, because I just, it's a big part of my personal practice, and I'm also a really big believer that that's kind of the antidote to a lot of stress and a lot of tension and all other kinds of things. So okay, well, let me start by saying, if you're stuck at home, and now I can actually see you.
Hi.
We've never actually met, but I know you live down the road from me somewhere.
Oh, so, yeah, I've been to one of your workshops.
Yes, but a long time ago, right?
Yes,
No, we have met.
Yes, indeed.
That's true.
Yes,
yes.
indeed.
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah. So essentially, one of the things that's true for anyone anywhere is you can punctuate a day with rituals, and it's particularly important in moments of stress or any kind of extreme situation, because rituals anchor us, and doing the same kind of things or doing things that point towards what's most important to us is really, really important. So yes, tea to me is kind of everything. So I pretty much start almost all the things I do with a cup of tea. And when Steve and I work together, we both have a cup of tea and we sit together, and everything's punctuated by tea. But the same can be true by creating a space for work. Like, so for instance, on my desk here, I have flowers and I have candles, and I have things arranged a certain way that make it so that each work session starts the same way. And then that allows me to kind of drop into the work that I'm doing. So every morning before I start working, I light a candle. I pull a few tarot cards just for the fun of it. And I write a fresh list, and that's how I start. And of course I have a cup of tea, and then that orients me towards the activity. And within suddenly staying at home and suddenly not being able to distract in some other ways, this could be a good opportunity to connect those rituals to feelings of well-being and aliveness and pleasure in the body by adding things like, massaging your hands with hand cream, very important when you wash your hands all the time, right? So you could actually make that something that de-escalates the nervous system, that creates sensory awareness, that brings a bit of pleasure and aliveness into the body and fulfills the function of nourishing the skin. So those would be really good ways to go. And as far as creating sacred space, having kind of order, however you see order, right? Not everybody has the same standards of orderliness or cleanliness, but creating order that in your system feels good, and having places in the house or in the room that you can orient towards so your system feels good is really important. And the first thing I did when I came home and went into self-imposed isolation because I had been in Europe, was I went and I put little flowers absolutely everywhere, and I straightened everything out, and I smudged my place, and I arranged things so that my body could settle at home. And I think that's super important. And of course, that's not as easy when there's kids tearing everything up, but you can find one space somewhere, even if it's just your nightstand. When we travel, often I have a little set of things on my nightstand, some flowers and a little deity and a candle and a pebble or something, so that when I wake up, I have something to look at that feels pleasing. So that would be my my suggestions there.
Thank you, Michaela.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, Tracy had another question.
So my question
there you
is,
are.
now you can see me. Something that hasn't been spoken to, which is the economic uncertainty that all of us are facing to different degrees. And just specifically, if either of you have any thoughts on orienting towards that and, the unknown, or perhaps for some people, it's already known. My industry is the restaurant industry, which has pretty much been decimated overnight. So people in the restaurant industry are already facing a lot of hardship and uncertainty. So yeah, just if either of you have thoughts on how to orient towards economic uncertainty.
One of the things that has to be said about economic uncertainty is that that cuts at the very core of existence. It's like food, shelter, clothing, like it's on that level. And so it is completely understandable and normal and also necessary to be worried about such things, right? And for some people, that's really, really immediate. I mean, there's people who live paycheck to paycheck, so not having a paycheck means they can pay their rent and so on and so on. So I don't think that's something that can be in any which way spiritualized or diminished, because it sucks when you have to suddenly cut down everything and you don't know how to survive. So and there's no advice there other than get all the help you can get and cut back everything you can cut back, and that's unfortunately as far as that goes. But beyond that, and that's hard because when we are contracted into kind of the base needs of our pyramid of needs, so to speak, right, and values, it's hard to be creative. But it is, of course, always an invitation to look at things and see what else can be done, right? And look at things and see what can be cut, and look at things and see what other options are available at the particular moment in time. And then with that, there is a potential chance of mobilizing that fear into some action and doing something with it. But for some people, it's really, really close to the bone, and there isn't much that can be done about it. Steve will probably talk a little bit about how to work with that in meditation and things like that. But mobilizing what can be mobilized on the realm of doing and creating is probably the best possible pivot one can do.
It's certainly a very difficult question that we don't have the answers to in practical terms. But from meditation point of view, or how can you use meditation? Well, in a way, this is for meditation business as usual, meaning that meditation works with the human experience, and in as much as uncertainty and difficulty are part of the human experience, it's in a certain sense within the input set of meditation. So any of your meditation practices will be able to work with it. But an interesting side point maybe is that The mind likes certainty, fixed points. Whether or not those fixed points are really fixed, or whether or not those certainties are really certain, the mind likes certainty. The thing about novelty is, of course, it's very stimulating, it's very enlivening. Uncertainty, in the sense of something new, an adventure, it's interesting, it's engaging, it wakes you up, it brings you to life, doesn't it? But the good thing about routine or certainty, or at least the appearance of certainty, is that you don't have to engage quite so much of your brain all the time. So when I go from my bed to my bathroom in my boat, it always is roughly the same. The boat does not change much. It does change on a sort of microscopic level. And if I was to do that journey for 1,000 years, of course, the boat would degrade and change very much. But basically, it doesn't really change. So as far as I'm concerned, the boat remains the same. So I don't have to think very much. My main thing is I'm thinking is like, how little can I open my eyes so I can go back to sleep more easy if I wake up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. So there's a natural desire of the mind for certainty. And you may notice a reaching out and a grasping out for certainty. And if a place where previously you had some degree of certainty or some degree of predictability is suddenly that the rug is swept out from under you, you may notice the mind trying to grasp for fixed points and certainty where there are not fixed points and certainty anymore. You may not know what tomorrow will bring in that particular dimension. And you can think about it and you can hypothesize about it and you can plan for the worst and hope for the best and you can do all that sort of thing. But sometimes you simply do not have the data to predict what's going to happen. And then you have an option that's available to you. And it's not a solution. It doesn't make the uncertainty go away, and it doesn't put food on the table. I should emphasize that. This is not that kind of a strategy that's going to necessarily help you do that. But it's something you can do in relationship to your situation, which is you can simmer like a sausage in the pan in the uncertainty. You can sit in the uncertainty and be uncertain and notice your mind lurching in this way, grasping for that, leaning over here. And there's an energy to uncertainty. In fact, there's an openness to uncertainty. There's an openness, and anything could happenness. That's the problem. When you're talking about where your next paycheck's going to come from, that openness is of course stressful. It can be seen as stressful. But there's a quality of openness that uncertainty has. There's a quality of movement that uncertainty has. And you can sit and simmer in that and recognize that uncertainty is a state, much like certainty is. And we don't know what's going to happen next. As Jesus said, who by worrying can add a day to their life. So sometimes to sit and bake in the certainty and be uncertain and realize that I am uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen next. That is how I'm feeling, and feel that. Rather than straight away saying, how can I get out of uncertainty into certainty? You may not have that possibility. Sometimes you just don't know. And so you can rest in what they call in Zen sometimes, don't know mind, don't know mind. When you can sit there with your koan, don't know, you can say, don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know. That's something.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so
Hi.
much for this amazing opportunity. I'm so appreciative. I really appreciated the call earlier this week as well. And actually what Steve was just saying was already really helpful towards my question, but I'll go ahead anyway. A little self-conscious because the only relevance this question really has to the situation that we're currently in is that increase of time. So I've had time to delve more into the practice of moving what I'm feeling. And my question is related to that exercise, which hadn't really drawn me. And I had really been taking directions from the book, The Wild Woman's Way book, and going towards the practices that drew me. But I wanted to dive into this practice, and what I'm finding is that when I go to move what I'm feeling very stuck in my head, and I'm feeling very uncertain about, not am I doing this right? I have a dance background, so I I do have that tendency to want to dance, and I have been doing a lot of the dancing practice. So maybe what I'm looking for is even kind of permission for it to be like that. Or like, am I moving like stuck in my head, or like what Steve was just saying, like I'm moving uncertainty, or I'm moving, am I doing this right? So that's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That's a good question. And, you know, moving what you're feeling is kind of a practice we teach a lot in our study groups and everywhere as a way of sensitizing. You know, somebody was asking earlier, how do you sensitize to your own sensation than other people? Moving what you're feeling is that practice, right? Where you really become in tune with what's happening inside. And what's happening inside is always a conglomerate or a cocktail of body sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And so sometimes it's interesting to enter the moving what you're feeling via a body sensation. Because that's not, you know, it's not just the head. So I can do it sitting here, right? I can feel that my neck back here is a bit tight. So I can just move as that tightness in my neck, right? And then as I do that, something else pops up, and then something else pops up. And then thoughts come as well as emotions and sensations. And I just go from place to place to place as it happens. So if you feel stuck, move as stuckness. If you have a recurrent loop in your head, you can move as that loop. But if you get too stuck on a mental loop, you can just refocus on the body, right? And just, or refocus on an emotion, or, you know, just like jump to somewhere else. And then if you come back, that's fine. But you can kind of put your attention different places. And then that sometimes helps break up the loop. And one thing that I sometimes have to do when I'm like in a like super heavy, let's say, period of either work or creation, is what I do is I have a little notepad. I'm the queen of notepads. I have, my entire desk is notepads, and I keep everything on lists, and it's a thing, right? So I have a specific notepad, a small one, that I'll have next to me. And even though it's kind of a closed eye practice, I will, you know, kind of pop out, write things down, and then go back in, because I have a function, a very strong function in my mind, where things that I'm not tending to, they're like a snooze function on an alarm. It just will pop back up and pop back up and pop back up. And so I've learned very early on that the best way is to kind of put it on an external hard drive in the form of this, and then I can roll with it. So that's an option. Or focusing back on the body is an option, or just sticking with it till it moves itself is an option. And you can wildly experiment with all three options.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I love that, popping out to write it in the notebook. That really resonates. So that I feel like that just hearing that is like, oh, I can do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't be dogmatic with these things, right? That the important point with all nonlinear movement practices, of which moving what you're feeling is one, is that you stay with it, and you have to be creative in how you do that. And so there's no need to be dogmatic around the keep your eyes closed if you need to download, right? And then that frees up some you know, headspace, and that's just what you have to do.
Thank you so much.
Julia.
Oh, hello. Thank
Hi.
you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. So I have a question about like feeling your feelings. So I'm a yoga teacher, and normally, like without this crisis, I always encourage the students to feel, like to go into the feeling, to allow feelings to arise. I do a lot of work with the womb, but during these days, I'm a little bit concerned that they go into too much of feelings, you know, like even maybe like a panic attack or something. And I'm not a trained psychotherapist, so I'm a little bit as hesitant as how much to encourage my students to go into the feeling.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to be said about that is that that's an incredibly good and reasonable and considerate, what should I say, consideration, right? So the fact that you know you're not trained to process heavy stuff, and the fact that you understand the mechanisms protects you from, doing harm, essentially, because you're actually aware of stuff that could happen. So that's really, really good. And I think there is a certain wisdom in not leading in general. Steve and I both are very heavy on not imposing our own needs for people to have emotional experiences, and not leading the witness, or however you want to say that. But I think just allowing for people to move their body and be with their body and not suppress what arises is enough, so that people can deal with things. Because if you just allow, without pushing or suggesting or inducing certain states, if you just allow what happens naturally to happen, then the body and the emotions and the mind can self-regulate. The problem is when you force people to go places that they wouldn't necessarily want to go themselves, or you induce certain states that really isn't, it's not the proper thing to do. So Steve probably has a few things to say about that too.
Not particularly. I think, echoing what Michaela said, it's probably a good instinct. You know your students relatively well, and you know what you're capable of, and erring on the side of caution is not a bad thing, particularly at the beginning. We're all getting used to this new format, the way life is going, and the way this whole new landscape that we're in together. And as we get more used to it, we'll feel its limits a little bit more. But certainly I think it's a very reasonable question you've got there. And so, sure, your instincts, I think, are probably correct.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We will do this again. If you're not signed up to the notifications, you can, just sign up to our general mailing list, and we'll let you know what's the next thing coming up. Also, both Steve and I post stuff on our Facebook and our Instagram. We did some conversation this week, and we'll continue doing that with like little tips and hints, and also practices. So in addition to the live calls, there's other free resources for you. And we'll announce the next call sometimes in the next few days. And thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.